Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Progressively Incorrect. My name is Zach Groeschel, and I am so excited today to be interviewing Shawn Datchuk about writing interventions and precision teaching. Just super excited about all the guests I've been able to have on this year. But first, before we go over to Shawn, let's talk about the sponsors. As you know, John Catt Educational is probably the best publisher for teacher books there is, and it sponsors this podcast. And it publishes many great books around evidence-informed teaching, including my book, Just Tell Them: The Power of Explanations and Explicit Teaching. Go ahead and check out the show notes for a link to the John Catt catalog. You may also know that I am the director of Step Lab North America. We put on tons of events for teachers, including online courses and in-person courses. I will put a link there in the show notes for you to check it out. It is for teachers, leaders, instructional coaches who are trying to work on giving feedback to each other and improving the PD in their school around the science of learning. So without further ado, let's go on over to Shawn. Shawn, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Zach. Thanks so much for having me.
This is one of those like rescheduled over and over again podcasts. So I'm very excited. We finally got a chance to align our calendars. Do you mind introducing yourself, your sort of elevator pitch of what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Shawn Datchuk. I am a professor of special education here at the University of Iowa. I'm also a director of the Iowa Reading Research Center. So we're a state-funded center that looks on trying to discover evidence-based techniques for reading and writing, and to disseminate those practices across the state of Iowa. I'm also a former K-12 special education teacher, elementary teacher, and academic director at the district level.
Nice. And we will be talking about writing there. Like I think everybody recognizes that expression is extremely important in as an educational outcome, but we do focus mostly on reading. What got
Mhm.
you into writing and developing writing skills in the first place?
That's a great question. To be blunt, I sucked at teaching writing when I was a K-12 special education teacher, and I would just sort of metaphorically bang my head on the wall saying, how can this be so difficult? I felt as though that there were ready-made, prepackaged things, certainly from such things as direct instruction and precision teaching, that I could just pull from my shelf and run with. I didn't find that same thing for writing. So my reading teacher shelf, there were some things. My math teacher shelf, there were some things. Writing, it was kind of barren. So I devoted my graduate studies. I got my PhD in special education from Penn State University. I had the privilege of working with my graduate mentor, Dr. Rick Kubina, who does a lot of precision teaching research. From there, I just really fell in love with trying to figure out what are evidence-based techniques that not only address individual letters. So I just had such difficulty helping my students legibly write, but once they could legibly write, or I was able to help push the needle there a little bit. Some of my students, or the vast majority of my students, I should say, if I gave them, let's say, 10 minutes to write a story or an essay, it would either be one long run-on sentence, or it'd be several short, choppy, incomplete sentences. So really let's see, this is, I think, my 12th year as a faculty member. So really for the past, over the past decade, I've been really looking critically at what I call sentence level writing skills. So that's everything from how to write a complete sentence to things like grammar rules, usage rules like capitalization, handwriting of individual letters, and also spelling.
As you mentioned those skills, and I'm going to kind of bring back some of the knowledge from past episodes so that we those that
Mhm.
follow along are getting some good PD in listening to
Yeah.
this. From what I understand, behavioral fluency is like the
Mhm.
key to a lot of success in more complex skills. And there are sort of
Mhm.
they're the smaller component skills that exist within any complex or composite skill. Maybe you could take us through this, like why this is especially relevant for kids with special needs or kids in interventions.
So, what I think that one of the really cool discoveries that precision teaching researchers way before me started taking a look at would be, I think the problem with every educator has a problem with time. So, what I mean by that is that particularly in special education, students with disabilities, just by its nature, you're working with students who display some sort of academic difficulty. And if those students are quote unquote behind, many of them don't receive additional minutes in a school day. So, as an educator, you're faced with I have the same amount of minutes in the school day as teachers have with students who, let's say, may be far excelling what the expectations are. So, if the minutes are the same, the time, the resources are the same, what are the high leverage pinpoint things that we can focus in on and really provide skilled practice, deliberate practice for students to develop in this with this phrase behavioral fluency. So behavioral fluency has there's lots of technical definitions, but I think that the kernel of behavioral fluency, I think, would suggest that if we help students increase not only their accuracy with a smaller skill, let's say in this case, let's say it's handwriting, if we have them increase the accuracy, then they increase also the speed of it or the rate. So, how accurate those skills can be produced within a certain amount of time, that gives us a sensitive way to take a look at student improvement, and that improvement can then allow students to more easily devote other aspects of their behavior to acquire closely related skills. So a specific example of this would be is that if you help students, let's say for instance, become more fluent, so have accuracy and speed with legibly writing letters, they should have an easier, better transition to then spelling words. And if they can spell words, then that leads them on the path to writing full sentences. So I think what precision teaching and behavioral fluency suggests is that as really thinking through what are those high leverage pinpoints that we can develop materials for, develop professional development, et cetera, that's going to help teachers solve that really tricky problem of time. I think that that's where behavioral fluency, kind of in a nutshell, really can lead to, I think, some exciting growth for educators and their students.
I'm picturing, the student who you look at their paper and visibly stressed, like they're holding their pencil very tightly and they're trying to form letters and
Right.
their pencil's
Yeah.
breaking and they get up and go get another, sharpen their pencil. And by the time they're done, they've really forced it just to get a couple of sentences out. And this could be the case that what is encumbering their writing may not be the ideas necessarily. It could just simply be
Right.
that they need to develop better letter formation. Maybe there's some other examples of different sort of interventions within writing that sort of tap in. I think that one is intuitive, but maybe there's other ones as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So the for the past decade, I have a line of research that looks at what we call sentence construction. And that's really just a kind of a technical research term to talk about sentence writing and what's involved into that. So for sentence writing, it's really these two big buckets. So one is that you have sentence structure. So when we, just as individuals, like I just wrote a bunch of emails, that seems to be a large part of my daily life is emails. But when you sit down to write, there tends to be these structures to where we phrase words such as nouns and verbs. We also have these signals on like, here's a capital letter, here's an end mark to let our readers know, okay, here's a complete thought. And those structures can be simple sentences, compound sentences, complex, et cetera. So that's one bucket when we talk about sentence construction. The second bucket would be text writing. So all the words within a sentence would follow rules such as grammar rules. So for instance, if I said, so I have two boys at home. So I have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old named Cruz and Misha. So if I say Cruz and Misha to sort of signify that I'm talking about both of them, the verb would have to match what that was. So Cruz and Misha, let's say, ran to the store, or Cruz and Misha run to the store. So that signifies, okay, I'm talking about both my sons. So that text writing would be coming up with words that are strung together that follow these rules of grammar or syntax. They would also have to follow rules of semantics so that they're strung together in ways that's comprehensible. So I could take that sentence such as Cruz and Misha ran to the store and just jumble up all the words. The sentence would have the same words in it, but if I just place them out of order, the sentence would no longer make sense. And then there was, again, the different signifiers of sentence structure where students would need to know capitalization rules. So that capitalization occurs at the beginning of a sentence, and it also highlights, hey, I'm talking about a specific person. And then also punctuation. So when we really think about, wow, those are all those skills involved just in sentence writing. And if those skills, if sentences are a part of paragraphs, if they're a part of essays, what my research suggests is that, again, coming from a precision teaching framework, is that if we want to help students make growth on these larger writing measures, so essay writing, writing complete paragraphs, there is some power in having sentence writing fluency, sentence construction as a pinpoint. So I've done some research that pairs direct instruction. I know I think if any of your listeners, such as myself, are familiar with your podcast, I think they have a working knowledge of direct instruction. But basically, there's systematic steps to help students acquire, hey, here are the parts of a sentence. We use very clear, consistent, concise language. And on my website, I actually have the scripts and things like that for free, and it's just my name. My wife makes fun of that website every single time because it's not the most creative thing I've ever done, but it's just ShawnDatchuk.com. So and it's free, so you won't see a pop-up thing that comes up like what's your credit card number or anything like that. It's just you can go on there. So it's just ShawnDatchuk.com. And it has things on there such as direct instruction scripts that I've kind of consistently tailored across the past 10 years. For instance, to go back to the clear, consistent, concise language, it uses kind of a counterintuitive definition for sentence writing. So for sentences, we can certainly tell students, hey, a simple sentence, let's say, has a noun and a verb. It also has a capital letter at the beginning and punctuation. And then a student can go, okay, what's a noun? And then you go, oh, well, a noun's a person, place, thing, or idea. And they're like, oh, okay. What's a verb? Well, it's a predicate. Well, what's a predicate? There's an action, and then it can also be a linking. But then guess what? There's also some verbs can be nouns, and those are called gerunds. And then pretty soon, you hear the beeping of the vocab truck backing up, and you just kind of dump a bunch of different terms, and it quickly becomes confusing for students, particularly those that are struggling. So if we take a look at direct instruction research, Zig Eagleman and his colleagues done some really wonderful work that I've just continued to try to keep building on. So if you look at some of the Zig Eagleman, Edward Kaminui, and Simmons, they suggest using the definition of a simple sentence. Simple sentence does two things. It names someone or something, and it tells more. So just name someone or something. So let's say Zach. Tell me more about Zach. Just tell me one thing. Is talking. Zach is talking. Okay, sweet. So just using that definition allows students to quickly latch on to that's the idea of sentence structure. And then a lot of the different text writing rules are actually done through modeling, guided practice, independent practice. So rather than coming up with rather complicated formulas, I'm not suggesting that students never know what a noun is or never know what a verb is. Those definitely have its place. But as an initial starting point, providing instruction that just has clear, consistent, concise language on name someone or something, tell more, has been shown to improve writing of K-12 students in my studies and then other researchers. And then following that instruction, we provide high dose, deliberate timed practice. So where students are writing in short bursts to these picture word prompts. So if you go to my website again, I have over 200 different picture word prompts on the website. And the reason why we use picture word prompts is because, so if we were to give students, let's say a writing prompt of, tell me something you're going to do on your summer break. That's a wonderful prompt. It allows students to make personal connections to their real world lives. Those are all things that we want as educators. What my research suggests though is that kind of prompt has its place. But if you're interested in just building the basic blocks of sentence structure and then also text writing, you actually want them to describe something you can see. And then so that way, when you provide feedback, we're all describing, all the students in the class are describing, let's say the same picture of, let's say it's a grandmother-esque character flipping some eggs on the on the stovetop, if they're all describing that picture, when we provide feedback to one student to two students in that group, your feedback ripples out. So it's instructionally relevant to more of those students since they're all describing the same picture. I've been in Iowa the past 10 years. And whenever my sons walk by a pond or something or a lake, they're big into trying to skim those rocks. And everybody knows when you skim a rock, you're trying to get ripples. And the same thing is with instructional feedback, is that when you provide instructional feedback on the basic building blocks of a sentence, really the best way or perhaps the most efficient way of doing that would be for these initial lessons to be focused in on describing something in the environment, in this case, pictures that all the students can see, that the teacher can see. So when you provide feedback on, whoops, yep, okay, yep, you named someone or something, in this case, grandma, then you told me one thing about grandma, cooked eggs. And students are roughly going to have the same things written down there because they're all describing the same picture. So that was a very long answer, Zach, but hopefully I kind of painted a picture of, I think, kind of the power of thinking through what are the smaller pinpoints, pressing down on that, and then what that can kind of lead to.
I want to dig into this entire design because it's fascinating. And it actually runs very counter to, I think, how a lot of us were trained to teach writing, which was
Right.
A, you were not taught to teach writing at all, but B, you were perhaps
Right.
B, I mean, the most famous example would be the Readers Writers Workshop, where essentially maybe
Right.
you talk a little bit about kind of generic thinking skills, like writers do this, writers do that.
Yeah.
And then you have all students go off and continue where they left off on their writing. And we have a lot of the difficulties in the instructional design that you just mentioned in terms of everybody's doing something different. So we have to give it, one to one feedback. They didn't receive the
Yeah.
inputs they need. They didn't get the component practice they needed. I,
Yeah.
I want to dig into this whole design. So, number one, congratulations on creating a library of scripts. I think that is
Yeah.
that's pretty sweet. So, one thing I've experienced with giving teachers good scripts, even just small ones, right? Just exemplify something, is that a
Yeah.
light bulb moment happens to them where this is how I would systematically teach something, define something, outline something, and this is how I would get them responding at like that 9 to 12 second rate, like at a very quick rate.
Right.
Have you have you also had that experience, like working with folks that kind of, use these that it actually might spill over into their practice?
I think that one of the bigger misconceptions in curriculum design or designing any sort of textbook is the idea that teachers want to create everything on their own. That has been counter to my experience as a teacher and then also my 10 plus years as a faculty member and before that as a district administrator. I think educators recognize how difficult their job is. Really, if we're being honest with ourselves, a teacher's job is only partly instruction. Another is school nurse, being the lunchroom monitor, the bus monitor, the part-time sub because somebody had to leave because they had a family emergency. And then so all the things that's going on in their day, teachers are hungry for different ways that they can internalize language that makes it easier for them to communicate with the children in their rooms. So, and I use children just across K-12. As speaking again, I also have two kids. I speak this humbly. There's every single day I run into words. Now, particularly my 8 year old, he's very word hungry to where his language is exploding. So, but it's very humbling to realize, wow, some of the words that I'm using, he just doesn't know, and I just assumed, like, okay, yeah, well, this is kind of in my day to day language, and then he'll go, what does that mean? And I think that same light bulb moment consistently happens, particularly when I talk about sentence writing with teachers, because I think even to adults and even to myself, some of the terms that we use to describe grammar are very counterintuitive. They make little sense until you really get used to them. It's difficult to pick out sometimes what is a noun in a sentence, what's a verb in a sentence versus what's the object of a sentence, which are prepositions, which are adjectives versus adverbs. So I think what that means is that when teachers have to try to figure out how these all mesh together, the sort of the go it alone, I'm going to try to carve out space for teachers to write their own instructional language can quickly become overwhelming and confusing.
What I imagine here is that the script is great for kind of passing it over to the student, sort of encoding that information in the
Mm-hmm.
first instance. But there's a second phase that you put in here that this is something I've been looking for. This is probably the main reason I was like, I've got to get Shawn on this podcast. It's just that I can appreciate like a well constructed kind of direct instruction script, providing the inputs, having students, talk about it, giving an example, giving non-examples, minimally different examples, and so on. But then we go off and have them write, you take out a piece of paper and write this hugely long text. And
Right.
how do we get them to practice in a more controlled environment? That is something I've been
Mm-hmm.
looking for. So what does it look like when that actually for the kid when they get to that kind of time testing environment? Like what are they doing?
Yeah, it's been I think one of the really cool things that I've seen across studies, and then now that teachers have been using this type of approach is the students are excited because they see they're making progress in writing. To your point, when you're engaged in kind of this long, extended composition, for many students, the first draft is the last draft. So it's just whatever's on there. Like, there's no way I'm going back and rewriting this. It's just like you'll get smudges or of eraser and pencil, and I completely understand that. I write for a living now as a faculty member, and there are times where I was like, man, I don't want to go back and rewrite this. Um, so that makes complete sense to me. So I think again, from a precision teaching framework, we myself and then co-authors have started to look at okay, what are those component skills, and then so what this practice looks like is that students receive a sheet that has 10 small picture word prompts. The picture word prompts are about 3 inches by 5 inches. They span across two typical pieces of paper, and the picture will show some sort of really just one someone or something engaged in some sort of action. So, for instance, you could see. I know one of the pictures has somebody that is dressed up like a clown juggling. Looks like four things in the air, and then so there's that small picture. It also has 2 to 3 word prompts such as clown and juggling. Let's say it has that. So it's prompting students, hey, here's a picture you can describe. Here are possibly 2 words you can use. And then so there are 10 different pictures and their accompanying word prompts on the 2 sheets. We give students just a short amount of time. In most studies, it's only been 1 minute to 2 minutes. Your listeners could be thinking, how could you write to 10 pictures in that short amount of time? The answer is you can't. So the idea here isn't to try to write to every single picture. It's to try to write complete sentences to as many pictures as you can in that short amount of time. So we go, okay, everybody get ready. Remember, a simple sentence, name someone or something, tells more, just tell me one thing. So that's kind of our way of suggesting don't write run-on sentences. Name someone or something, tell me one thing. Start with a capital. Remember your punctuation mark. Please begin. And then students start writing. We start a timer. At the end of 1 minute, we go, okay, or at the end of 1 minute or 2 minutes, okay, put your pen or pencils down. And then let's say if we're working one-on-one with the student, we actually then read out loud each response. So in that 1 minute, what typically happens is that we see students attempt, let's say, 3 to 4 sentences, and we read out loud. And when we read out loud, we actually score for something called correct writing sequences. So for correct writing sequences, we look at does the sentence begin with a capital letter? And then we look at in between every single sequence. So between every single word. So it could be the capital. Okay, awesome. You get the point there. The clown. The clown, that makes sense. So we're looking for does it make syntactic sense? So it follows rules of grammar. Does it make semantic sense? So does it express meaning that I can understand? So the clown was. So the capital, the clown. That's awesome. Clown was. So we sort of sequence it out there. And then so we are out loud. In that instance, the scoring becomes kind of a modeling to where we're like, okay, wow, yeah, all those things. And students are getting points for each response. Then they see, oh, okay, I'm being successful by writing together words that follow these rules. And we aren't even really getting into really complicated rules yet. So we aren't talking about subject verb agreement, et cetera. We're using this just through modeling and guided practice. And then so it's going like that. If a student has an error, let's say it says the clown juggle. So we go, whoops, okay, something's missing here. So it'd be the clown was juggling, the clown juggles. So, and then we kind of model that. We have the student fill it in. And then we turn that paper face down. And then we go, here's a brand new copy, the same exact 10 picture word prompts. Try your best, write as many complete sentences as you can. Please begin. And then we start the timer again. And then students, now they're having to draw from their memory because they aren't looking at what they wrote on like, oh, let's see, what did I write? Okay, so it's giving them the opportunity to retrieve those behaviors that follow those rules of sentence structure. And then what we typically see is, let's say, on that first timing, students maybe score 10 correct writing sequences. And that second timing, what we see is that maybe students will score 11. And then we do those same procedures, and then we do one more timing. And then we go, okay, let's try your best. You don't have to keep writing the same sentence. Then we do that again. And then so what ends up happening is that in the span of 3 minutes, so 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, students will have gotten high dose of high quality practice. Because in that 1 minute, they've written 3 to 4 sentences. So let's say that repeats across. They've written approximately 10 sentences in 3 minutes to where they have gotten feedback on the basic building blocks of a sentence. And what we've seen is that we've seen growth in typical writing tasks used by schools to identify students with writing difficulties. So in multi-tiered systems of support or response to intervention systems used to divide different resources across a school. It's common practice for schools to administer these brief writing fluency assessments to where they're timed. Students have to generate their ideas, generate text quickly, and then those are also scored for correct writing sequences. So how many words can students write that follow these rules of writing? And so we have seen growth across those from elementary through high school age students, which has been really exciting. So this is not a comprehensive writing curriculum at the moment. So it's right now we've sort of really drilled down on the power of just focusing in on sentences. And then we've done some similar stuff here at the Reading Research Center on handwriting and things like that. But we're using that same idea in terms of what can we provide for explicit direct instruction, and then what types of practice procedures can we provide that allow students to engage in lots of high quality responses in a short amount of time to build up their accuracy and their speed.
Wow, that's very exciting. It's not how you see writing taught or practiced
Right.
or assessed in schools, but it does fit into what a lot of what we've been talking about on this podcast. So it's so great. Am I correct? You're the director of the Iowa Reading Research Center.
That's right. Yep.
I'm curious as listeners are hearing this for the first time, we want this stuff. We want to see the research sort of start to trickle into the classroom. How do you address kind of this research practitioner gap when it comes to the fact that there's more and more research that comes out every year? Hopefully in this climate, we'll keep funding it, but teaching in classrooms is largely just sort of up to the individual teacher to make those decisions, whether or not it's based on evidence or not. And a lot of times it's just not even the teacher's fault. It's just that they don't have
Right.
the training and the resources to do great stuff like you're talking about.
I think there's kind of this whole narrative, and I think that's a great point. There's kind of this whole narrative that when people, passionate researchers, people who are working with educators such as yourself, I think that people can kind of view that as we're taking away teacher autonomy or that we're somehow not honoring the profession. I don't think that that's true. I think that what the support that we can provide through things like suggested instructional language, like materials, things like that can only free up teachers to really focus in on their whole profession. And it allows them as to give them touch points on ways to improve. Every profession is like that, whether it's in the medical profession, like so. For instance, I just got my, I'm in my 40s now, so I like everybody in their 40s, I get more physicals. So like when I get my blood drawn, I want those set standards there. I don't want the phlebotomist to just go like, okay, well, I'm going to kind of do my own thing. Every profession runs with, okay, here's some set things, and then you find your way and your style on how you deliver those. So I think that that's an important point, at least in terms of for the research to practice gap. I do think that that is an unfortunate part of, I think, just how disjointed educational systems are. We have places and researchers, I think, doing some really incredible work. We have some teachers doing some incredible work, but without particularly those two groups talking with each other, I think that that gap is only going to persist. So I do think that there are some exciting things on that people are working on. So at the Iowa Reading Research Center, at our core, we have embedded this framework of translational science that really comes out of from different from reading researchers such as Emily Solari at University of Virginia, and then also some wonderful folks at the Florida Center for Reading Research. But translational science means is that when we are creating things, so we have, for instance, some handwriting applications that are, one's coming out for cursive and one we just published for print. But when we were designing those in translational science, is that we centered ourselves with our groups that we want to help and we want to learn from. So during its conception of what does the research look like, what research do we need to do, what design solutions or applications do we need to develop, we talk with educators, we talk with caregivers, we talk with students. So at its ground floor, we were trying to make this by design something that is going to stick in schools. So I think that that's one. Two is that all of our products and all of our projects that we work on every year. So we're a state-funded reading research center. So we are very thankful. Not many states have this, but we receive Iowa tax dollars. So we are Iowa's tax dollars at work. So each one of our projects not only has a research component, but it has a detailed plan for how do we disseminate products. So those can be online modules that live on our website. Those can be applications. Those can be lesson plans. And then we also have technical assistance plans to how do we provide staffing to show people how to use these things. So I think that a combination of those two certainly can help. So a translational science, so at its conception, talking with collaborators and having them be involved in the design process. But then two, being very deliberate on this research project has these specific dissemination technical assistance strategies attached to it. We hope that that will help. But I think to your point, Zach, I think particularly in our information age, so much can be spread so quickly that there's some exciting things there. But I think what that also means is that research, if it continues to be funded at levels that are appropriate, that's going to continue to keep expanding, and that gap can keep getting wider, unfortunately, unless we are very deliberate about ways on designing, conducting research. And I think that that's why things like that you're doing, like with this podcast, are so cool in that space, because it allows people to find out about different things that wouldn't otherwise. That I don't know before. I don't know how people would find out about that. It would just be perhaps through a newsletter, or maybe some colleague stumbled across something. So the fact that there are these things out there, YouTube, social media, et cetera, I think can certainly help.
Yeah, and a lot of times what is interesting in terms of a research question, or what's interesting to researchers, to put it another way, is just not what educators want answered. And then in
Right.
addition to that, there's not that many people like you who are even doing experimental research, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the research designs can't answer these big important questions in terms of causal relationships between
Right.
different variables. And so it seems like, to kind of speak about the problem of funding research that we're in, it seems like it was already a bit of a mess before even that even happened. And
Right.
I think a lot of people are kind of weighing those two things. I mean, maybe what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's I wish I had the perfect solution for this, but I definitely get that the tensions inherent in having a robust portfolio and skilled researchers working on problems that are pressing. We are bound to have in that system of researchers spread across the world, working in different research labs at different universities, you're bound to have different directions. And I think that's powerful. We want people to explore things that wouldn't otherwise perhaps be found. I think Zig Engelman, direct instruction, is a perfect example of this. From my understanding, he was involved in marketing before education. So, just to sort of think about how that made a leap. And then so I think that what that means is that if science doesn't always follow this linear path of consistent progress towards a dedicated outcome, I think what that means is that with the many branches, I think that's the case for additional funding needed because we need to sort of see where these branches grow. And then when certain branches really get strong, we need to press down on those. And I think that that's what can be so troubling, perhaps particularly at the federal space, that you can certainly get short term savings by going, well, we just need to focus in on fewer branches. One of the problems with doing that, though, is that we aren't quite sure where those branches are going to grow yet. I think that that's one part. I think the second part, to that important point, though, is that can also, I think, bring up just some natural tension too. So we can have in the era of the science of reading and the science of reading reform movement. I think what that means, though, is to your point that we have lots of potential solutions out there. Curriculum manufacturers have had to refashion, I think, themselves kind of overnight, and that has resulted in perhaps some stickers saying science of reading. But without those experimental studies, I think what can end up happening is there's a rush to conform to kind of this larger movement, but the larger movement requires close experimental analysis. So I think what can end up happening and I think increased tension is likely to happen is that as curriculum manufacturers, as people kind of rush to try to get ahead of this curve, they can produce products that kind of dilute science or reading because people will go, I've tried this. I've tried direct instruction, small DI. I've tried, this. I've tried explicit instruction. However, it was just really those things by name. And it wasn't really representative of what the core of that is supposed to entail. So I think that there's lots of interconnecting, perhaps tensions there and problems that I think that unless we have kind of a more robust, dedicated research arm that can really meaningfully inform through experimental analysis and studies what's in curriculum, what different things that can work. I do fear that the larger, much needed, I think, movement can end up being fading away if we aren't careful.
So, with that note, looking ahead, what would you like to see in terms of a focus for research in literacy education over the next few years?
I think there's a handful of things. One is I'm really excited about the interconnections between writing and reading. I think that writing remains a neglected R. There's a famous book that came out, over 40 years ago, The Neglected R, and it's still true today. I think that teachers are faced with difficult choices on what to spend their precious instructional minutes on. And with reading and math difficulties, if students are facing reading and math difficulties, teachers can put all their eggs in those baskets. So I understand those difficult decisions. However, the close connection between writing and reading can't be ignored. So I think what that means is that there needs to be a place for writing. So for instance, if a student goes to handwrite the word cat, they need to draw upon representations of things that they've learned regarding this is how the C is shaped, the A is shaped, the T is shaped. This is the name of those letters. This is the sound of those letters. So what we see through different research studies. Young-Suk Kim over at University of California, Irvine has done some wonderful research on this that looks at just how closely connected writing and reading scores are. That's so I do think that that's going to be a big area for much needed development and exploration. I think, too, broadly speaking, is I think that I spoke a little bit about the need for continued experimental analysis and the need to conduct research. I also do think that there's a sizable body of research out there that suggests we know that at its core, these things should make up a standard of care within across schools. And so I view that as a capacity building focus. So how can we not only kind of show people that, hey, these things could work, but how do we build the capacity of educators in a meaningful way? So not just through a one-day professional development that happens in the middle of the week to where teachers are very tired, but how do we meaningfully ingrain these practices, these knowledge, these skills with educators to where it builds their capacity to help students in their classroom?
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to see where we go with this. Maybe one more time, could you share your website so that we can, I'm sure people are going to want to go into it, and any other contact piece of information before we go?
Yeah, for sure. So my website is just my name. So ShawnDatchuk.com, ShawnDatchuk.com. That has the sentence writing, things that I talked about. So where I work at the Iowa Reading Research Center, you can get to there by iowareadingresearch.org or just Google Iowa Reading Research Center. We have different materials that follow similar structure for print handwriting called Literacy Lifter. And then in June 2nd, I'm not sure when this is going to air, but June 2nd of 2025, we have a cursive handwriting one coming out as well. And those are all free. So those are free on my website and also free on the Iowa Reading Research Center website. I'm also on Twitter, Blue Sky, and that's just my name on there. And I'm happy to chat with people if they have any questions.
Awesome. Shawn, this was a great discussion, and I'd love to keep having it with you, in the future. I always want to be like the 14th name on one of these papers you're writing. So if you ever want to if you ever want to slide
Right,
me in there,
good.
if you want to slide me into one of these things, that'd be great. Datchuk, thank you so much for coming on Progressively Incorrect. Listeners, thank you so much for supporting Progressively Incorrect, and I would appreciate it if you could go ahead and pass this to an administrator, get this show out there to people at your school, and spread the word about evidence-informed teaching practices. I just love hosting this show. It's just a passion project of mine, and I really appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you so much, Shawn. Take care.